Well, good afternoon, Facebook viewers. My name is Brad Bodis. You've gotten used to seeing me here on Wednesday afternoons at the law offices of Bond and Bodis. We've been doing these Facebook Live videos for several months now. When COVID started up, we thought this might just be a temporary thing, but it looks like COVID's going to be around for a while, and thus we're going to continue to do these Facebook Live episodes to try to touch upon important issues that are impacting people we assist. Just as a reminder, the Bond and Bodis law offices are located across Alabama. We're throughout Mississippi, and we're in the Knoxville area in Tennessee, and we help people with money problems. And a lot of folks are having money problems these days. We want folks to know that during COVID, we're offering absolutely free initial consultations with an experienced attorney, and we're doing them virtually. We'll do them from the safety of your home or office by phone or video. Encourage you to be proactive. Today's Facebook Live episode is an important one, and it's we're going to touch upon a pretty deep topic here today. You may remember my good friend, Dr. Dale Wisely, appeared in a previous Facebook Live episode where we talked about reopening schools and the issues parents were facing in whether or not to send their children back to school. And we had a lot of interest on that topic, and I know from my friendship with Dr. Wisely over the years that an issue very important to Dr. Wisely is suicide, and suicide, what we can do to reduce the number of suicides and also to deal with the aftermath of suicide. Dr. Wisely has a PhD from the University of Memphis. And he is a child and adolescent psychologist. He's currently with Prince of Peace Catholic Church, and he's also the executive director of All In Mountain Brook. Dale, you also shared with me, and something I knew but I'd forgotten, that you also have a master's in divinity from Spring Hill College down in Mobile. And I think that's important to this topic in particular. But you were with us previously, and thank you for being with us again, Dale.
Oh, my pleasure, Brad. It's always good to see you, and thanks for the podcast. I'm impressed by the topics and your viewership.
Well, thank you very much. It's important to have good guests like yourself. Dale, if you would, we gave a kind of a detailed introduction when you appeared last, but if you tell folks a little bit about your education and background and your experience in dealing with issues related to suicide.
Right after I got trained as a psychologist, Brad, I moved to Alabama, taught a year at the University of Alabama as a visiting professor, and then came to Birmingham. I worked for 14 years, I guess it was, at kind of running the psychology department at Children's Hospital. Tremendous experience. Left there sometime in the late 90s, I guess, and a group of us did private practice of psychology and psychiatry over in Vestavia Hills. And after several years of that, my interest had started to kind of evolve. I kind of got more and more interested in school issues and kind of community issues. So I took a job and worked in central office at Mountain Brook School District. I was there for 12 years, I guess, as director of student services, working on health issues and mental health issues, high risk behavior in kids, family issues, and things of that nature. And then 2 years ago, I retired from that work. I retire regularly, retired 2 years ago, and came to work at Prince of Peace, where I'm director of family life, and still have some work in Mountain Brook. We have a nonprofit there called All In Mountain Brook that tries to deal with high risk behavior among youth and trying to keep everybody alive and healthy. So that's what we're doing. Thanks, Brad.
Well, I know again from our friendship, and we've worked together for many years. We both served on the board of directors of the Crisis Center here in Birmingham. I know of your work, and I want to just tell our viewers that you're very fortunate to hear Dr. Wisely today. He has a lot of expertise in this area and a very compassionate man. So the topic today is suicide awareness, and I asked Dr. Wisely to address this issue because I've been helping people with money, with financial problems for over 30 years. Bond and Bodas Law Offices, we again specifically try to work with people to overcome financial challenges. And I am hearing more stress and more anxiety in people's voices today than I think I've ever heard. People are without work. People are uncertain as to the future with COVID. Small businesses are failing. People are facing tough times. And, you know, I tell the attorneys that I work with regularly, you know, sometimes we can almost allow ourselves to become deaf as to the feelings that people are expressing, and we can't do that. I personally remember, it's been 15 years back now, but I remember counseling a lady that came in with her pastor, Dale, and we got to talking about the issues, and I realized that her husband had recently passed away. And I learned, unfortunately, that she and her husband had been to another bankruptcy attorney, not with my firm, but they talked about options, and the attorney really didn't give them any hope. And following that consultation, her husband had taken his own life, just didn't feel like he had any hope. She was back to see us with her pastor, and we were able to come up with a plan for her, fortunately, but it just made me realize, you know, that we're dealing with these type issues all the time. And I want viewers out there to know all of the issues from an expert, from Dr. Wisely today, pertaining to suicide.
Hey, Brad, I want to interrupt because there's something so important, I think, about that story. People in the mental health field, people in that, to some extent, the health field in general, people in schools tend to be tuned into this more, you know, just by virtue of what we do. But I've always been interested in the idea that it's people, professionals in other walks of life, that often encounter these people that are in trouble, people maybe who are resistant to getting mental health care. And so attorneys, without question, you know, I guess almost by definition, if you're talking to an attorney, you're under a lot of stress. And I always think about years and years ago, there was a program somewhere in a northern state, Montana, North Dakota, someplace, where they had a grant to train 2 professional groups to be more sensitive, better listeners, and know how to respond initially to suicide, suicidal people, depressed people. And they were bartenders and hairdressers. And I've never forgotten that. You know, it's just, whoever had that idea was a genius. Because, you know, there women
Absolutely.
who are watching know that they will often speak to their hairdressers about things that they wouldn't talk to anybody else about. We all know sometimes men will bend over bars and say all kinds of things to bartenders. And so I just thought that was, right. So we probably ought to be always thinking of ways to build awareness among other professional groups about this, you know, and not have that confined to mental health and educators.
That's an excellent point. People hold these things in too much until they finally find someone, whether it be a bartender or a hairdresser or an attorney. And by the time they get to us, they're just so filled with anxiety. And when it comes out, you're right. It's so important that we be receptive and we pay attention and show some compassion. Dale, I do want to give a quick plug before we get started here. You're an author, and you recently, just last week, released your latest book called 7 Stars.
Right.
And we're going to promote that book on the bottom of our screen here. The book is really about childhood trauma.
Right.
And it touches upon suicide. I was fortunate enough to attend virtually your book reading last Friday and really enjoyed it. But tell us a little bit about what compelled you to write the book and a little bit about the book, if you would.
My hobby, I write as a hobby, and I'm interested in literature. It's a literary work, and I write poetry, write essays, and edit some literary journals in my spare time. And I've been working actually on this project for a long time. It's as a child, when I was 11, the man who lived across the street from my family one afternoon shot himself fatally, and I was exposed to that scene, and it was a very traumatic event, something that took me some time to recover from as a child. I didn't speak for several days and had some, I think, probably largely psychologically based medical issues for a while after that. And actually, as it turns out, my father, who's also on the scene, my father was a combat veteran of the Navy in World War II in the South Pacific, and I think had PTSD. And he was involved in it. And so the book is kind of a blend of experiences I had, experiences my father had, and also experiences a friend of mine had growing up that I've kind of pulled together into this little book. The main thing I want to say about the book, though, is just like you, I'm just devoted to this local organization, the Crisis Center, and I wanted this book to be a benefit for the Crisis Center. So we've had a donor that's donated all the copies of the book, and so when people get a free copy with the donation to the Crisis Center. I think we have on the screen how people can do that, but I appreciate you asking me about it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Go to the link that we have on the screen there for the book, and it will guide you to the Crisis Center and how to make a donation. Yes, we, as I mentioned earlier, we both served on the board of directors of the Crisis Center. And in fact, the Crisis Center executive director, Meg McGlamry, was a guest on this Facebook Live a couple of months back, and we talked about the Crisis Center. But let's dig into this deep subject, Dale. I have some questions here that I want to go through with you and give you a chance to address. So tell me this, with COVID so far, have we seen increased suicide rates? Or are they expected to increase?
We don't know, which is frustrating. And the reason, and by that I mean the suicide prevention community, the public. The reason we don't know is that the best source of that data is the government, federal government, and it takes them 2 years to compile the data. So sadly, we won't know for another year and a half or 2 years how COVID has impacted the suicide rates. But there are some things we do know. And one thing we know is we already have data from several lines of evidence that people are reporting much higher levels of psychological distress, emotional distress. Substance abuse is looking like it's going up. In fact, all of those numbers seem to be really exceeding what people expected. I think people expected we'd have more distress, more mental health issues. But, you know, we keep talking about this, really unprecedented. We just have not been in something like this. I mean, since 1918, we talked about this before, and we didn't do research like this in 1918 or keep numbers like this. So the good news is, it's not a given that suicide will increase. As I was saying to you before we started, suicide rates did not go up sharply in 2008 when we had that big financial crisis. That was a little bit of a surprise. But the other reason we're concerned about this question about suicide this year is because we were already in a crisis before the pandemic, a public health crisis not many people were talking about, which is rapidly rising suicide rates. After years of either being stable, depending on which age group you were in or demographic, they were either stable or kind of declining. But for the last 20 years, suicide rates have been rising. So just to illustrate that, about the last 20 years, suicide rates globally or in the United States are up 30%. A major cause of death, up 30%. And if you read in the paper that in the last 20 years, cancer deaths were up 30%, or heart disease, we would absolutely call that a national emergency and do whatever we had to do to try to stop it, or childhood cancers or anything like that. Suicide rates in girls and women are up 50% in the last 20 years. So that, I don't know, I'm not sure I know the definition of a crisis, but that sure seems like one to me. Granted, it's one that's been playing out over 20 years. We're at a place now where suicide is the 10th leading cause of death overall. It's the 4th leading cause of death for people who are aged, I guess, 35 to maybe 55.
Wow.
And it's the 2nd leading cause of death for young people, ages 10 to college age, that age group, really 10 to about mid-30s. The number 2 cause of death is suicide. Only accidents, principally motor vehicle accidents, are a larger cause of death. So it's a big concern. We will have to see, but it's not a given. But all of the conditions are in place to see, even sharper increases this year in suicide rates.
Dale, does research show, are there specific factors or life events that can lead to suicide? Are they financial issues, divorce, relationship issues?
All of those. It turns out job loss, unemployment, all of those things have been shown in research to be associated with increased risk in suicide. I need to be careful about that too, because the balance on all this is that, as we both know, people can go through the most horrific crises in their lives, just everything falls apart, and ultimately do fine. They get through it. Yeah. They get the right kind of help and the right support. So none of those things are obviously inevitably lead to suicide, but they do seem to increase risk. So yeah, divorce does. Your major changes in employment, obviously unemployment is, and I don't even know now, we're at 10%, I guess, unemployment. Money difficulties, and particularly when those goes back to your earlier example, especially when those money issues or other stresses are associated with hopelessness, no way out, there's nothing, or helplessness, there's nothing I can do. I'm fond of saying this, but if somebody's experiencing significant suffering, including, emotional stress, really hurting, and that's combined with a feeling of hopelessness that nothing can make it better, then you're in the room with a suicidal person, whether they say they are or not. I often challenge my friends, think about the moment in your life when you suffered the most. For me, it would be a kidney stone. Where I don't know if you belong to that brotherhood, Brad, I can't remember. If somebody had told me and convinced me, Dale, you will feel this way for the rest of your life, I don't know that I wouldn't be looking for a window. Right. I mean, let's be honest. Right. We get through these terrible times in our life with the hope that we're going to get better, whether it's in 15 minutes when they bring me medication, or after I get through this divorce, or after I work through my financial problems, things get better. When people are robbed of hope, that's when things get dangerous.
Just a constant theme of all of these Facebook Live episodes that we've been doing is to encourage people to be proactive. There is help out there, whether it be through the Crisis Center, whether it be through legal counseling. And on your screen is the number for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Reach out for help. Or if you see somebody or know of somebody that could use help, help guide them. Make sure they're aware of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. But reach out for help. Be proactive. There is help out there. We certainly will help with financial issues. We're available for consultations, but there's so many avenues for help. Don't feel hopeless. Dale, the next question I had is, are there certain groups or demographics, whether age, race, sex, what groups are experiencing suicide in larger numbers today?
There's a couple of concepts here that are easy for people to confuse. And one is how do demographic groups differ in their suicide rates? A rate meaning how many people in that age group in a given year die by that cause, in this case, suicide. And then sometimes it gets confusing when you talk about how those are trending. So we quickly can do both. The rule of thumb about demographics is older people are more likely to die by suicide than younger people. And that surprises people. A lot of people think it's the teenagers, because we hear a lot about teenage suicides, and there's something just particularly tragic about those, in a field of tragic events. Those are the ones that sometimes get us the most. But actually, teenagers are far less likely to die by suicide than adults. So parents, grandparents more than parents, parents more than kids are at risk for suicide. Men are more likely to die by suicide by a ratio of something like 3 or 4 men to women.
Huh.
And we believe that's women as a group are more likely to attempt suicide and survive. Men, if they do attempt suicide, they're more likely to choose a lethal means, largely firearms. About half of the firearm deaths, suicide deaths are firearms. In Alabama, it's 2/3. 2/3 of the suicides we see are done by firearm. And then the third demographic is white people more than black people, white people more than other minority groups. That's been a very 100% consistent trend as long as we've been studying suicide. White people, white Americans, much more likely to die by suicide than black Americans. Now, the changes tell a little bit different story, these changes in the last 20 years, because some of the groups that are low suicide rates are rising faster. So the best example of that is the lowest suicide rates in America historically have been young black girls. So low that I keep up with this. We've had years go by, whole calendar years in Alabama, where we didn't lose a single black female young person. I'm trying to think of somebody who's not reached the age, minor.
Right.
Not a single one in a year, which is astounding. But that group, which is still a low number by rate, is rising faster than any other group.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's what we're seeing. A lot of the groups that have tended to be lower suicide rates, their rates are climbing faster than adult rates. The highest suicide rates, though, in North America are old white men, geriatric white males. But there's a lot of national concern about rising suicide rates in black people, in women, and in younger people.
Wow. Well, do you have any theory as to why we might be seeing an increase in those areas?
The real mystery, we think we know why older people more than younger people, which is, generally speaking, as you get older, some of the support you have, the guidance, the supervision, the monitoring of youth kind of goes away. Or you're more likely to be dealing with health problems, financial problems, things of those natures. So I've already talked about men versus women. It's probably a cultural thing about choice of method. The reason that white people have and still are more suicidal than minority groups is still a mystery. I've never seen a very good theory for that. I recently, I'll be quick, I had a wonderful experience. I spoke at a mostly African-American Baptist church here in Birmingham, had a wonderful day. They asked me to come and talk about suicide. It was a wonderful experience. And I said, we're having increases in suicide rates among black people, and we don't know why. And several people said, church. They said the African-American worship community has been a source of glue in those communities, and that's beginning to weaken.
Wow.
Now, I have no idea if that's true, but I just thought that was a fascinating thing to hear from people, in the pews. So that's the best we can do on it. Trying to figure out what that's all about.
What impact? How about quarantine? People, at home alone, children at home with their parents, not in school. What impact does that have?
I was just thinking, I was making a note about this before we started. There's a psychologist named Thomas Joyner, whose work I follow. He is a major researcher on suicide. And Dr. Joyner has a theory that there are two major factors to be watchful about, sort of interpersonal factors with suicide. Think about this in the context, Brad, of the pandemic. Isolation and disconnection, a sense of not belonging, that factor. Right. And another factor is feeling like a burden. Now you think about that from your work. Think about people who are quarantined, and that's what it's all about. That's what quarantine is being isolated and locked away from the interactions people have. And then a perceived burden. If you're unemployed, you're not bringing home the paycheck. You're worried about if your kids are going to be okay without you, maybe they'll be better off without me. Depression tricks us into thinking things that are not true. That's a key to understanding depression, is it lies to you and convinces you that you have no worth. It convinces you that there's not going to be any future. For kids in quarantine, again, new experience for all of us. But one of the things that I think is clearly true is that kids developmentally thrive on interaction with their peers and their teachers. And so that has been greatly reduced in a way we have not ever seen. And so I was speaking at a high school faculty at the opening of school recently, and a teacher said something to me I thought was wonderful. Smart. She said, "We're going to be piling all this work on these kids, which is what we've always done. We're also going to be fussing at them all day long about wearing their masks and staying away from each other. They're going to have the worst of schoolwork and people fussing at them, and not be able to talk to their friends, not be able to hug their friends, not be able to exercise and do sports. That's all limited right now. So they may literally be getting the worst things about school and not getting the things that pull them through a school day, like the social aspect of it." And I think we talked about that before.
We did,
so trying to work all that through, but everybody's concerned about it. And anecdotally, because I work with so many parents, I'm just hearing lots of things about how their kids are just teary, difficulty sleeping, more anxious, and we'll see. Well, I think we'll see more and more data about that as we go through all of this.
I want to encourage our viewers. We've alluded to it a couple of times here, but Dr. Wisely did appear in an earlier episode where we talked about kids returning to school or not returning to school. That episode really had a lot of viewership and a lot of interest. And if this issue is important to you and it's something you're dealing with now, I encourage you to go to our law firm's Facebook page and go back to that video, or perhaps encourage friends that may be dealing with this to go back to that prior video with Dr. Wisely on the topic of kids returning to school. Just to recap here, I'm Brad Botus, and I'm an attorney with the Bond and Botus Law Offices. We're attorneys that help people with financial problems, people facing money issues. We have offices in Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee. During COVID, we're doing these Facebook Live episodes just to touch upon important issues as we are today on the deep topic of suicide with Dr. Wisely. But we're encouraging people to be proactive. If you're having financial problems, if you need somebody to talk to, we are offering absolutely free initial consultations, and we'll do them from the comfort, safety of your own home and office. Reach out, talk to an experienced attorney. Don't just sit back and worry. Reach out and be proactive. All of our Facebook Live episodes are available on our Facebook page. 2 weeks ago, we had one of the top consumer bankruptcy attorneys in the country, Omax Gardner, and we talked about mortgage forbearance issues. Also very important, if you want to go back and watch that. And next week, we'll have a Los Angeles attorney by the name of Eric Clark, and we'll be talking about companies that offer debt negotiation and tell you that they can cure all your money problems. Some things to be aware of there. But back to our special guest today, Dr. Dale Wisely. Dale, this is really important. What are some of the warning signs that somebody might be at a level of depression, anxiety, that they may be contemplating suicide?
That's a great question. I'm going to go over, I'm going to glance down my notes because I don't want to leave anything
Sure.
out. But the sort of signature that people think of it with depression, I'm going to talk about depression and anxiety almost interchangeably because they are so often seen together. We've all heard the expression, worry yourself sick.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of folks worry themselves into depression. It begins as anxiety and it develops into depression. So the two things are often found together. We think about sadness, and that's important. If people feel sad, express sadness, or teary a lot, that's certainly a sign. However, some people who are depressed, clinically depressed, don't feel so much sad as they do kind of empty, just kind of blank, kind of blah, nothing, no spark. It's not so much sadness as we call it flatness, like flattening of mood or affect. Some people worry a lot. Then a really big one is irritability. A lot of people who are clinically depressed will tell you they don't feel sad, but they'll bite your head off while they're telling you that.
Right.
So and I'm not, I worked with a lot of teenagers in my career, and sometimes people will say, Dale, really, an irritable 15-year-old? And I understand what they mean. But the irritability that comes with depression is just incredibly intense and unremitting, like nothing you can say will make them any less aggravated at you. So there's that sort of intensity of it. Feeling guilty, feeling worthless. Again, those are all related to the lies that our depression tells us sometimes. Hopelessness, which we've already touched on, is a major symptom of depression and a dangerous one because it's the absence of hope that often leads people into self-destructive behavior. Decrease in interest. I used to like to do this, I used to like to do that, and I'm just not interested. I don't care anymore. People lose interest in like food, and they'll literally lose their appetite or just not find much enjoyment in that. Decline in things like sexuality often goes away. Sexual desire and function will go away sometimes when people are depressed. Low energy, low concentration. And then quickly, sleep and appetite can often change, and they can go in either direction. So some people with depression can't sleep. And a very common variation on that is waking up extremely early in the morning, like 3:30, 4 o'clock, before you really want to wake up, and not being able to go back to sleep. We call that early morning awakening, which you often see with depression. Other people will start sleeping more and more. The bed's like it has a gravitational pull.
Yeah.
In every free moment, they head for the bed and take another nap. Sometimes they'll sleep 8 or 9 hours, take 2 naps during the day. Appetite, same thing. Some people lose weight when they're depressed. Some people gain weight. Sometimes they're eating to comfort themselves, so that's in there. Last one, and this is particularly true of teenagers and children, although you see it in adults, is a lot of times symptoms of depression come out as aches and pains. Headaches, stomach aches. I trained many child psychologists, and I used to tell my students, when a young person complains of almost daily stomach aches, and they've been to the doctor, and the doctor can't find it, it is usually some kind of emotional stress, the daily tummy ache. There are just not that many things that will cause a child's stomach to hurt day in and day out. So it's a weird kind of a constellation of things, some of which we would normally associate with depression, like sadness or low energy. But then it can be all these other things. Depression affects the body. It affects all kinds of functions in the body. Like people get constipated when they're depressed. Believe it or not, it's an extremely common symptom. With
Hmm.
severe depression comes constipation, and there are all kinds of biochemical explanations for why that may be true. So it's tricky.
All right. Wow. So if I'm a family member or if I have a friend or a loved one that I think may be experiencing some of these issues, what can I do?
All right. Just went over some signs of depression. Let's alter that a little bit. What about sort of the possibility of real suicide risk? Because
Right.
most people with depression do not die by suicide. In fact, most people with any kind of mental health issue, even severe mental health issues, the vast majority don't die by suicide. Sometimes I worry and talk about this. People feel like there's almost, a kind of inevitability to it. But that's the hopeful note, is that the vast majority of people survive mental health crises. So it's just a couple of the big threes. When people are suicidal, more often than not, they will talk about it. They'll make threats, or if they're angry, they'll often make threats. If they're not angry, sometimes they'll just say, I just sometimes feel like I'd be better off dead, that people would be better off without me. But they'll say something about it. There are plenty of people who don't speak about it, sadly. But the best research is that more often than not, when you look back retrospectively, people said something about it. Then another thing to be watching for is people who are formulating a method for how they would harm themselves. They're looking for things. They're trying to gain access to firearms. They're trying to accumulate pills. So those kinds of signs. But really, it's the communication piece that's there. To be blunt, sometimes after a death by suicide, in the immediate aftermath, people will say, we had no idea. And then later, retrospectively, they'll start thinking, oh, she said that, or there was this. And they'll start to kind of maybe put it together a little bit more. It's true that sometimes some suicides do appear to kind of come out of the blue. But more often than not, you go back and you sort of make sense of how someone started to kind of move in that direction. Increases in substance abuse, which is both a symptom and a cause. Symptom in that if you get depressed or anxious, sometimes start treating yourself with drugs or alcohol. And the more you do that, the more it contributes to your depression. So it's really not a good choice. The combination of depression and drinking too much or doing drugs is typically not a good idea. Drugs, of course, I mean drug abuse, not what's prescribed to people. So those are the warnings. Now, in terms of what to do about it, a couple things. A big, big believer in, as we kind of alluded to earlier, in, I hate to use this cliche, opening up the lines of communication. So what that means is if I'm a family member of somebody I'm concerned about, I don't need to sit around waiting for just more and more and more evidence that they're in trouble. I need to speak up. So let's say I'm raising a teenager and she's been angry, irritable. I'm worried about her weight loss. Her grades are in decline. And she doesn't seem to be going out and seeing her friends. Rather than just kind of waiting to see if that's a phase she's going through, how about saying, hey, I want to talk to you for a minute. I've been reading in the newspaper, or I saw a podcast or something about suicide, and I know suicide rates are going up in teenagers, and I don't want to ever have you feel that way and not talk to me about it, so I want to ask you about it.
Oh, wow.
I think we have a fear that will conjure it up if we ask,
Right.
and I think that fear has no basis.
Wow.
If you say to a teenager, do you ever think about hurting yourself? I think about the worst that can happen is they'll go, no. The best thing will happen is they will say, I've been feeling bad. I've been feeling bad. Or they'll scream at you and say no. And then a day later come back and say, I have been feeling sad. They need time to kind of think about it, process it. So I'm a big believer in asking the question the people we know and love.
Wow, you're so right. I think most parents would think just the opposite. They'd be afraid to raise the issue because I think they're going to create thoughts of suicide.
I'd say it's a big problem, Brad, because I do think that's it's almost a subconscious thing. But let's be clear. It's 2020. There's not a 15-year-old in the United States who doesn't know about suicide. sadly. They're all they've been exposed to it through TV or conversations. So it's not like the very mention of it is going to have somebody say, well, gee, I wasn't feeling suicidal, but now I think I will. It just doesn't work. So I think the risk of asking that question, I want to say zero. I guess I ought to hedge, but I think they're so close to zero. I'll put it this way. I would not hesitate to ask that question of my own children or grandchildren if I had concerns about it. And then the risk of not asking the question, could even be somebody saying, why is nobody asking me? Don't they see that I'm irritable and angry and moody and I've lost weight? Why doesn't anybody care enough to ask that question? So as you can tell, I'm a big advocate of trying to encourage people to do that. I say that to professionals. I know nobody wants to ask that question for fear they'll say, yes, I'm suicidal on your watch. But it's a potentially life-saving thing to do, to say, to help them destigmatize it, to say, oh, I've got friends that have gone through this. I've got family members that have gone through this. And so they don't feel like they're the only person in the world who's suffering.
That's really great information, Dale. Dale, I want to touch upon this. We live in the Bible Belt. Most of our offices, Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee, in what's known as the Bible Belt. And you have a master's in divinity. I know your faith is important to you, and certainly my faith is very important to me. Prayer is very important to me. But I think sometimes that parents can perhaps send the wrong message to their children. You touched upon this a little bit earlier, but I'm praying for you. Rather than going deeper and asking those questions, have you thought about hurting yourself? Can you give your perspective on that?
Sure, I can. And the danger in all this is insofar as we use matters of faith to try to avoid taking advantage of things that are given to us, as far as I'm concerned, by God himself, which is smart people who can help us get through things, communities who can help support each other, families who can get each other through rough times. So if we say, if you would just get your head right and get your heart right with God or Jesus, all this would go away. I think it's easy to demonstrate that's not true. Right. For example, the suicide rates among clergy are not different from the general population, which, so that means to me, I often say, and I'm not kidding, nobody's immune to depression. You're not, I'm not.
Right.
The Pope is not. Right? There's no such thing as somebody who's immune to depression. And so it could hit anybody. So that's part of it. Another potential danger is there are people of faith that are very well trained to help with people with these things. We have pastoral counselors. We have, believe it or not, we have all kinds of psychologists and psychiatrists who are people of faith. But I think sometimes people come into it thinking are a little bit suspicious of that, and so are reluctant to avail themselves of it. Never any problem with saying I'm praying for you, as long as it doesn't stop there.
Right. It's it's the old story about the man praying to be saved from the flood and the boat comes by.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think also, if we want to be blunt about this, many of us were raised to believe that feeling suicidal and certainly dying by suicide is a sin, almost unforgivable, or that means somebody will go to hell. And I tend to think of suicide as the worst kind of outcome of a terrible illness, like, some kind of mental illness or whatever. And I just don't know that I can find a way to think of that as something we ought to dismiss as just sinful behavior. We sin, when we are fully in charge of our faculties and we know what we're doing. If we're not in charge of our faculties and not thinking clearly, then we should kind of get a break on that judgment.
Dale, we've talked about the signs of suicide, and we've talked about what parents and loved ones can do. They can talk about the problem with people that are hurting, but at some point, a decision may need to be made. Hey, I need to call the police, or I need to call 911. When does that point occur? When should that step be taken?
You're right. I think there's sort of different levels on this. At the kind of worst case scenario, meaning you have somebody you have some responsibility to, and you have reason to believe they're suicidal and they're in danger right now. So an example would be, let's say you're parents of a 25-year-old and you're in touch with them and they're in town, and you say, and you have a conversation, you learn they are feeling suicidal, and you say to them, are there things we can do to make sure you don't act on this? Will you promise us that you'll hang in there, let us get you some help? And they say, no, won't make any promises. Or if they say, as soon as I get a chance, I'm going to hurt myself, that is a medical emergency. Mm. And the way we deal with medical emergencies is we call 911. So that's kind of the highest level. You're a person's in danger. They can't say or do anything to kind of help you work with them to make sure they'll be safe for a while, So that's a 911 call. And it happens a lot. Somebody in Birmingham tonight, probably more than one family, will do exactly that. They'll call 911 because they have a family member in trouble. Kind of short of that, if you're concerned and you need to move on it, we do have crisis lines. We have our local crisis line. We have the national suicide crisis line, which is a tremendous resource. It typically does connect people to their closest suicide prevention program. And they are trained people, trained volunteers in most cases to help people get through it and connect them to the resources in town. Another one that people sometimes neglect, Brad, and particularly when it's not an emergency, it's a concern, but not emergency, is calling your primary care doctor. They also take these kind of calls. Pediatricians, for example, I think about this all the time in Birmingham because I've worked with so many pediatricians. Pediatricians are very psychologically sophisticated because they don't get through a day they don't deal with mental health issues. And that's really true probably of OBGYNs and internists and lots of folks. And so they know they can often facilitate getting you into somebody's care. So if you call around and you cold call psychiatric clinics and psychologists, you may not get very far. If you call your OBGYN or your child's pediatrician and you say, this is what's going on, he or she can often pick up the phone and get you seen quickly because they have, networks and people they can call on for that. So that one often gets neglected. In fact, in a perfect world, primary care doctors would know at least in broad outline what mental health issues their patients are struggling with because it can often be tremendously helpful. More antidepressant medications are prescribed by primary care doctors than by psychiatrists. Yeah. Because there's so much more of them. There are not enough psychiatrists to take care of all our mental health needs, So primary care people are very involved in taking care of people with mental illnesses and other disorders.
I want to let you expand upon something you mentioned earlier, and that was a little bit of good news that most people that are depressed, most people that go through these issues do not end up committing suicide. Talk to that just a little bit, if you would, for our viewers.
I hope you'd ask, because I think it is, you hear all this stuff and it's not the cheeriest topic, right. But there really is an absolutely optimistic approach to all this, and it's based on fact. And that is that most people that have even a significant mental health crisis will recover from it. They will recover from it often because they get appropriate treatment. Sometimes people, to be honest, sometimes people just get better. Depression, for example, has a tendency to occur in episodes where, you kind of start to feel bad in February and you have symptoms for weeks or months, and then you get better. Treatment often helps us get better faster, stay better faster, or stay better longer, so I'm a big advocate of it. And that's the second part, is that the kind of interventions that can be done can really help people. We know how to help people with depression. Now, it's a little bit analogous like other serious illnesses. It doesn't mean you can help everybody. Right. I often use kind of a cancer analogy. If somebody develops a cancer, I think in 2020, most people survive.
Yeah.
And most people survive because they get very good care. And then there's a subset of people, we all know it. We've all lost family members to cancer. We know in spite of everybody's efforts, it's a bad outcome. But it's important to remember that big middle piece, which is the overwhelming majority of people with mental illnesses, even severe ones and even chronic ones, are not going to die by suicide. They're going to be able to function, and get through it. Support they get from friends help. Support they get from their worship communities and from their families, and those things make a difference to people.
Now, it's some of the people that can offer the most support are people that have been through these issues on their own and overcome them, and that's encouraging to me. I do want to touch upon a couple of these questions that have come through. There's one here. I have friends whose child committed suicide, and the parents just can't get over it. Survivors of suicide. Mm-hmm. What advice can you give to people like this?
I've mentioned a couple of times, Brad, that that mental disorders, in particular depression, will trick people into believing things that aren't true. And one of those is, my family will be just fine. They'll grieve me for, a few months and then they'll move on with their lives. Sadly, that's not really true. It is true that just like any other kind of grief, people can work through their grief, find a place to live with their grief. But, you don't recover fully ever from the death of a family member, and especially by a death that's complicated as suicide, where often we don't fully understand what happened, So I always tell people, if you want me to tell you the truth, I'll tell you that it's not true that your family's just going to bounce back at some point. It's going to be a terrible blow to them. And this question is an example of that. It's a difficult thing to get through. There are support groups, and that's the best model we know. Support groups, sometimes grief counseling. And that'd be the two avenues I'd pursue, is grief counseling. If it's appropriate for these people, not a bad idea for grief counseling to seek a referral through either their worship community or through the crisis center. And as you know, the crisis center is connected to, in some cases, runs the survivors groups for people who have lost family members to suicide. So this is another thing where help is available. It's not a cure. There's no such thing. But as you were saying, people who've been through it are often the ones who are in the best position to kind of reach out and help.
And one other person, and we'll finish here. We're getting near the end, but they're concerned about an elderly family member that they can't visit now because of COVID.
Oh my gosh!
And the depression. I don't know if there is an answer there, but can you give any direction to that individual as to how they can help that family member?
And Brad, isn't that one of the most heartbreaking things about this year? I think about it all the time. How I would be feeling if I had an elderly person that I loved in a nursing home and couldn't get to them, or a person on a ventilator. It's just the saddest. And I feel like in many ways, it seems like unnecessary. We just didn't have to have this many. But I think the key on that one is for whoever it is that is the caretaker for the older. Now, if they're living alone, then you got to use whatever communication you still have by telephone or by video conference to do what I was talking about earlier, to be willing to speak it out loud and say, we're worried about you, we're worried about your mood, we're worried about depression, how can we help, how can we get your doctors involved? If they're in some kind of supervised facility, assisted living or a nursing home or a physical rehabilitation setting, Then it's about being willing to say, we don't know that we're right, but we're concerned about so-and-so's mood. That can lead to a psychiatric consultation where they call in a doctor. At minimum, it should lead to somebody just keeping an eye out, maybe going in and asking, having a contact, somebody who's able to have that kind of contact with them. It's a great question, though, and it's kind of a side effect of all this terrible stuff about how we can't have contact with people who are ill or at risk for being infected with the virus.
Just from my perspective, I know a lot of older people in my family. We talk about video chatting or FaceTime. A lot of older people, the best thing you can do is write them a letter. That's the way they communicate.
That's right. And phone calls. That's right. Yeah. The Zoom is still kind of a dicey, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, there's something about, my mom is 91 and she still has a box of letters that my dad wrote her when he was in the Navy 70 odd years ago. So,
Brad, I have the same thing. I have 2 boxes of letters that my father wrote my mother during World War II.
Yeah. It's those can be special. I encourage young people to write to elderly family members. Dale, we're near the end of the hour. I want to thank you again, Dr. Dale Wisely, for just important information that you've shared today. You're really a treasure to our community, and we're so thankful for you participating. I want to encourage our viewers, as Dr. Wisely said earlier, there is hope. At my firm, we help people with money problems, and please don't hesitate to reach out if we can help you. But depression in general it's so prevalent right now. We don't know exactly what COVID will do with suicide numbers, but we know even before COVID, suicide numbers were increasing dramatically. I encourage you to go back and listen to what Dr. Wisely had to say again. This video will reside on our Facebook page, or if you know somebody else that may be impacted by these issues in their life right now, encourage them to go back and watch this video and reach out for help. But on behalf of Dr. Wisely and Dale, thank you. And the attorneys at Bond & Bodes, thanks for tuning in today. Be positive, reach out and get help. There are a lot of folks out there to help you. Until next week, God bless all of you. Thank you, Dale.
No, thank you, Brad. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.